Hey, and welcome to the Well Fit Lab podcast. I am your host, Burnout Coach Shy 1000, and I'm so excited you can come today into the lab. Today, we have an awesome guest talking about his journey as a serial entrepreneur and balancing success and family wellness. I am so excited about today's episode. Let's go into the lab, grab your pen and paper. You're going to need it to take some notes and grab your cup of tea. Let's get going. Hey, friend, have you been wanting to start your own podcast? There is no better time than right now to get started. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me give you 5 reasons why you need to get started today. 1, it's free. 2, they are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. 3, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. 4, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Did you hear that? That means you can always be making money. 5, it's everything you need to make a podcast right in one place in the palm of your hand. What's stopping you? All right, nothing. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started now. All right, so today we are talking to Paul Brunson, and Paul Brunson is a all-hands Renaissance man, media mogul, has worked with the likes of Oprah, has worked with the likes of any and everyone you can think of, has also been the behind-the-scenes secret mentor of some of your favorite celebrities, also gets to sit down with some of your favorite celebrities for his own podcast, as well as his own platforms and shows, and is currently the host of a major show in London. We won't get into the details. We'll let him talk about that. But today we're going to be talking to Paul, and we're going to be talking about all things mental health and the commitments and the sacrifices that go into our success across the board as humans, our in relationship to our families. So, Paul, thank you so much for being here today.
It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate the intro. I really do. Some people just kind of read off of a bio sheet, but others, speak from the heart, and you definitely spoke from the heart. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Paul and I actually have connected on multiple levels. He's actually been a mentor to me at different points throughout my career, as well as just somebody I admire on social media and how they navigate social media. And they don't allow social media to navigate them or use them. And I think that's very important for boundary setting and mental health purposes. So I totally appreciate that as well about you.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I tell you, this is a great overall theme in terms of wellness, because it's really interesting. You go back just 10 years ago, wellness was all about the physical. It was all about make sure you go to the gym, make sure you get your cardio in, right? And that definitely impacts your wellness. But all the topics that you cover are much more pertinent to lifestyle wellness. So I
Yes.
can't wait to get into it.
Awesome. All right. So I love that you say that, because I think I always tell people there's a wellness pyramid, and the wellness pyramid consists of spiritual, physical, and creative. If you can tap into all of those buckets at any point throughout your day, throughout your week, you'll notice you have more balance. You are holistically well. But if you're missing something, as long as you have items to pour into those buckets, you'll recognize when you fall short in different areas as well. And it'll usually come from one of those 3 buckets. So in today's conversation, I really wanted to talk with Paul in regards to a post that he put up on social media about a commitment that he and his wife made, and the level of priority that his family had in his life. Now, Paul is very successful. Like, Google Paul Brunson, like, only thing that's going to come up is nothing but success stories. So I just want y'all to do that real quick. Then I want you to know that that level of success takes also a level of sacrifice. And so, depending on the boundaries and the relationship that you have with yourself and your loved ones, that can all be done, but there also has to be a level of priority, level setting and boundary setting. So I want Paul today. We're going to get into the post that he made, the commitment that he made to his wife, and then what the outcome of all that was and where he was at mental health wise. Because once again, Google him because you'll come to find out that Paul is not just a successful man, Paul is a successful Black man in the media industry on many levels. And Paul is also a father, Paul is also a friend. And when you have the level of success that Paul has, that can be lonely at times without a strong network there to support you. So, Paul, if you can just jump into the commitment that you and your wife made to each other, and you're actually that you not just made with your wife, but you made to your family, and then what was going on at the time where you guys kind of veered away from that commitment due to something else, and then what the outcome of that was.
Yeah, the post, the
Yeah.
disastrous post. It's interesting that we're talking about this post because when I posted it, I was just being authentic with my feelings, and little did I know it would cause a lot of conversation. It was picked up in all of the quote unquote press in the UK. People thought I had quit the show. There was questions around, me being the angry Black man, which is interesting because in the post I was just expressing, my emotions, but I was, of course, positioned as the angry Black man. So the origin of that post goes back 10 years, right? So 10 years ago was my first television opportunity. And it was, we were living in Washington, D.C. My wife and I had just launched a matchmaking company. And literally within a month of us launching, we were contacted by Oprah Winfrey and her team, which that in itself is, a crazy story and a massive blessing. But I want to underscore to everybody that my goal was never to be a television or media personality. I was always focused on business. Finance was really my background. But I took this opportunity, and the opportunity was to co-host a TV show called Lovetown with Oprah Winfrey. And the show was shooting in Kingsland, Georgia, right? Not too far from you.
Yeah,
in Jacksonville. A matter of fact, I don't know if we ever talked about that. We actually did casting in Jacksonville.
No, we never talked about that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember driving from Kingsland to Jacksonville. There was it was like a downtown, not like a downtown area, but it was like this real cool, like, oh man, I don't know what it was, but it was like this like town center that we went to try to cast. But
Yeah.
anyway, we so that was the show, right? Now, at that time, personally, what was happening is my wife and I say my wife and I always joke when I say this because it was really her, right? We had a baby,
Yeah.
And it was every baby, it's a glorious occasion, right? But for us, it was a particular blessing because we had been trying for 8 years
Wow.
and had gone through IVF several cycles. We had lost
Wow.
a baby previous to that, so
Wow.
it was a real significant event in our lives. And so I get the show, we have a baby, right? Now, the like the hook with the show is I had to go to Kingsland and we were filming for 45 days straight.
Wow.
And I couldn't bring my wife or our baby who's
Wow.
Kingston.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
I'm not, that's not lost on me, by the way. I know you're Jamaican, but Kingston, and you were filming in Kingsland and
yes,
Kingston and Jamaica. I'm like, huh. And as soon as you said it, I was like, ooh, and his son's name is Kingston. Okay, continue.
exactly. It's wild, right? Wild.
Very.
And so, but at the same time, while I had this opportunity, it's with Oprah Winfrey,
Yeah.
who is so everyone, it was like clear that I was going to take this opportunity.
You don't
Um,
tell Oprah no.
yeah, you just don't. And she had just launched her network, and we had just launched this business. And by the way, we were financially strapped. So knowing that this show was going to help to boost the business was also a big driver.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I accepted the show, and my wife and I said, okay, we'll just deal with it, right? We'll be apart for 45 days. Now, when I got to the airport, right, when my wife dropped me off, right, Kingston is in the back, strapped into his little baby seat. I literally started crying, and
Mm.
I hadn't cried for many years. You know, literally, I don't recall crying for many years, and I was crying as she dropped me off because I was thinking to myself, you know, my son, he's just born, and I felt like I was deserting them almost.
Mm.
You know? But I, you know, continued on, got down to Georgia, you know, did my thing for 45 days. Jill and Kingston, as well as my brother and some friends, they came to Georgia at the very end, at the, you know, when we wrapped up filming.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I sat down and we said, you know, this was such a hard period for us, you know, these 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
And we value family so highly
Mm-hmm.
that we just let career, we let profession, we let money, like we let all of these aspects of life that we consider to be of lower value than our
Mm-hmm.
family, to basically dictate what we did. And so we made a commitment to each other. And that commitment was we would never separate our family physically if there was a project that lasted 10 or more days, right? So we knew that by me doing that show, there was going to be a possibility of other, you know, television
Mm-hmm.
work. You know, just because of other projects that I'd been involved with, there was a possibility of me going away. There's a possibility of Jill going away. But we said to ourselves, if it lasts under 10 days, that's fine, right? You know, a week,
Mm-hmm.
3 days here, that's cool. But if it was over 10 days, we would restructure our situation so that we could go, or we would not take the project, right?
So it's either family or we negotiate how this works because family is priority.
Exactly. That was, we
Mm-hmm.
said that's number one, and so we need to treat it accordingly. Um, and we did, you know. So from the Oprah Winfrey show, fast forward to, you know, right around now, um,
Mm-hmm.
that's 10 years, and I had a TV deal every year for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to California, we went to New York, we were in DC. You know, we moved to London, right, for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
We moved all around, and we never broke that commitment. We
Mm-hmm.
always moved together as a unit, and we really, you know, we really reshuffled a lot of our life for that. You know, for
Mm-hmm.
example, when we moved to London 4 years ago, we took our boys out of school and committed to homeschool them so that we would have the flexibility to, you know, to move all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
um, so we really, you know, we really created our life around our values, which, uh, you know, family being at the top.
Yeah.
That's what we did. Now, here's where things get interesting. Um, at the end of last year, so we're talking about, you know, 2020,
Mm-hmm.
basically. Um, I had been, so my family, we had been living in London for 4 years, for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
at that time. So on and off for 3 years. So we would, you know, stay in London, you know, for, you know, 4 or 5 months, go back to the US for 2 months, come back to London 4 or 5 months. And it was
Mm-hmm.
mostly because I was shooting a TV show
Mm-hmm.
in the UK, and then I got picked up for a second TV show. So
Mm-hmm.
so I was co-hosting two of the most popular TV shows, right, in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so by the end of 2020, you know, we're obviously in the middle of COVID, and at that time, it just so happened that we were back in the States, And when another project came up for filming, the project was for 45 days.
Wow. So it's basically the 10-year anniversary of
Yes.
the original situation. And so that would be actually the 10-year anniversary of the original Oprah show without before commitment, right?
Yes.
So now 45 days again, not a coincidence. I believe that things happen that are definitely not coincidental. So this is almost as if to say full circle, the commitment is now being under pressure because we've been able to navigate this so well all these years. Now what?
Exactly. Well said. Well said. So the question comes up, okay, it's time for us to go. Now, the production company pushed back. They said, but it's COVID. We have all of these stipulations. It's high risk to bring your family, blah, 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 blah. And we listened, right? It seemed logical,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm,
seemed safer to keep the family in the U.S. By that time, we had a second child, so two boys, my wife. Um, so we decided, despite upholding to
mm-hmm,
this commitment for 10 years, we said, it's only 45 days, it's only about 6 weeks,
mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm,
we've been managing this far, it's no problem, right?
mm-hmm,
So my wife and I said, okay, we'll do this. So she stayed in the US. I
mm-hmm,
flew to the UK,
mm-hmm.
flew to Surrey, in the UK, outside of London, and shot the show for 45 days. Now, during those 45 days, it's really important to note that I maintained all of my normal wellness regimen, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm a stickler for. Like, I get up early, I do affirmations, I exercise, I do significant cardio, I I'm into meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I take CBD and CBDA. Big believer in it.
Mm-hmm.
I was my my stress levels. I was trying to manage that. I was eating
Mm-hmm.
right. Very clean. I was basically doing everything that I normally do. Right. So
And
in the 40,
overall, those things normally would have worked and contributed highly to your level of performance and success. Normally.
yes, yes,
Okay.
normally, right.
I think it's important to stress that because we say to have a routine and have all these boundaries. However, those things don't always mean that you're going to be 100%, especially when there's an area of your life that's not being nurtured the way it might have in the past, because that would now be the anomaly of the entire situation where every other thing is the norm.
Exactly. Well said. Well said. I mean, everything else was maintained, but the one missing piece was family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed by the time I got into week 2, I noticed that I was off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was a little bit more agitated. I was a little bit more irritated on things. I normally, everyone I shoot with normally, I have a very pleasant rapport with them. Certain things really started irking me about certain people. And I just felt off. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, and it was interesting because I would get home, immediately jump on a FaceTime with my family, right? So we were seeing each other,
Mm-hmm.
we,
Mm-hmm.
we, we were even, we had a book club. We were reading
Oh, nice.
a book every night,
Mm-hmm.
together. So it was one of those where there was still a connection, but
Mm-hmm.
physical connection wasn't there.
Yes.
So long story short, by the by the time we got into maybe our fourth or fifth week, I had literally, I almost got into a physical altercation with somebody on set.
Wow.
And in 10 years, I had never, ever come close to a physical altercation.
Wow.
Um, Now, this guy was definitely in the wrong. I will say that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
he definitely was on some nonsense. But normally I would have managed it much differently,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. I didn't get physical, nor did he. But
Mm-hmm.
I could see I was seconds away from it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just this surreal experience. I'd never felt this way before. And so long story short, the show wrapped and everyone is celebrating the show, in terms of like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, when a TV show wraps, normally there's, let's go out, let's party, let's hang out, like, let's really celebrate this accomplishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I remember the final that the once the show wrapped, there was a photo of uh the entire cast taken, and
Mm-hmm.
someone said, Paul, wow, what's wrong? Like, you should be so happy right now. And in my mind, I mean, I didn't even answer them, but in my mind, I was
Wow.
thinking, I just need to get home. Like,
Mm.
I just literally need to get home. And so I got back to my flat and I wrote a post.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't post it until the show actually went to air.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote the post before the show went to air.
Wow.
The show went to air like 30 days later. So I, put the post up because the
Mm-hmm.
show runs for a month. So I put the post up almost 2 months after I
Wow.
felt those feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the post essentially was just me explaining everything I just explained right here,
Mm-hmm.
just how I felt, how important, how I realized family was truly everything to me,
Mm-hmm.
and how I will never break that commitment. I mentioned the thing about the potential altercation, didn't say who it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Said all of that. And I thought that by doing that, it was not to get reaction. Like, I don't post to get reaction. What I do is I post how I feel,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I just let it land where it lands. And so after I posted it, I mean, like I said at the top, it was really crazy. I mean, there was a newspaper here that hired someone to try to track down what was happening on set, to try to find
Wow.
out what I was doing. I mean, it was just like, the press here is crazy anyway. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but people said I had left the show, and but that being said, there were a lot of people who really applauded the fact that I was, expressing this emotion. So it was definitely a wild experience, but it was all a lesson. And
Absolutely. Wait, Paul, I want to pause there.
sure,
I want
sure.
to pause there because I think it's really important without even saying what the after effects of, just knowing what we know right now. This is a commitment that you and your wife made 10 years ago, which was also at the beginning of your climb and being a serial entrepreneur and just really the magnitude of everything you do today. This was the very beginning. It's almost like the birthing of that. So you had a baby at the same time, and you were also birthing all these businesses as a result of all the things that came from this one engagement, that new business, your baby, all these things played in factor. So I think it's important to just cast a light that making that commitment and value aligning early on in your career helps set the tone for your career. And
Mm,
if you don't, you will navigate and chase checks a lot of time. But with checks come additional things that everyone's not always comfortable with. So I think it's really important to add that, because I think that in my personal opinion, you might not have had the same level of success had you and your wife not made this commitment at the very beginning of your career. What do you think about that?
mm. I've never like reflected on that, and no one has ever pointed that out to me. So that's blowing my mind right now. And I'll say I 1,000%. You like that? 1,000%. Um, I I agree with you. I do. Because the our values are, to me, it's basically our code, right? That's
Yeah,
our rule book.
yeah,
And we followed that code for 10 years,
yeah.
and we were able to really get some good yield,
Mhm.
good results from it. So I agree. I agree.
And I think that even a part of that, so You guys followed that code. And I love that you call it a code, because I think that a lot of the time we look at organizations when we're joining new companies in our careers and things like that. And you're like, oh, what's their mission? What do they value? But we don't ever think about what that looks like for us. And I think a lot of the time you got to be mindful of culture and what you value and how it plays into these organizations for your career growth. A lot of the time we don't realize that a reason that we're not moving in our career is because the organization doesn't value what you value or you find important, and your values change over time. But a value such as strong as family is not normally going to change. And when you make that decision at the very beginning of something, that can change the trajectory of your life, because when you're not chasing checks and you're willing to walk away from the table, when that value alignment is not there, that's a completely different dynamic. There's no desperation there. And it also allows God to move. It leaves space for God to do what he needs to do in your life, because you're not in a state of desperation.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And like I said, the three pillars were physical, creative, and spiritual. And I think that's the spiritual aspect of it. But I also think there's something to be said about the 5 love languages, right?
Right.
So once you know what you value and you know what your love languages are, when it comes to your relationships and how you navigate them, that looks very differently as well. So even though we're not saying physical touch, but being physically in the presence of your wife and your children, which is already a high value alignment, now you're physically in their presence. Physical is also part of the 5 love languages. So there was a part of your bucket that wasn't being filled at that time. And when there's a depletion, we can only go off of whatever's left over, right? So like your reserve. So you were tapping into what you guys had stored up for the 10 years that you were together within those 6 weeks now as your reserve, and then refueling every night through a FaceTime with your family. I think it's really important to be mindful of that and to just put light on that. And as you guys are listening, I want you guys to think about what you value. And then how do you keep your values in alignment with the things that you do, the decisions that you make, and how do they show up every day in your life? And how do you show up in life as a result of those values? Because I think what Paul has already touched on is how he's been able to show up in life because of the one decision that they determined was their number one priority. And that was a huge, important value for them. And so that's allowed him to be very successful. But also, when we don't stick to that thing, how does it in turn work out? So, all right, Paul, continue, please.
No. I mean, you're right. How does it work out? And it was disastrous. It really was. I mean, to the point where I had calls. I had executives calling me, and I remember there were people trying to push my manager to have me take down the post, which I didn't. You know, but that was actually that was literally the first request was
Wow.
just take down the post, and there won't be any issues. But once again, that went against my code, and which is authenticity.
Yes. Yes.
Acceptance of self, and so that is I mean, what you said was gospel. The other part of that is it really begins with awareness.
I was just about to say that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Your
Yeah.
level of self-awareness has to be high, else you won't recognize it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You have to be able to recognize it. Then there needs to be a level of self acceptance.
Yes.
And then you have to be able to structure your life so that you can maintain that. To your point of what would have happened if my wife and I had deviated from our values, our code, we may not have been able to, achieve certain things, in our career, right?
Yeah. Man, that was such a good episode with Paul today. This was only part 1, so I hope you were taking notes. Man, the lab is already full of gems. Paul was just dropping so much information and insight about this decision that he and his wife made 10 years ago and how it has impacted their life and how it has led to them being successful in life and successful in family. Us not having it all is only a myth. Make sure you check out part 2. You are not going to want to miss it. Make sure you're following Paul on social media, Paul Brunson. Everything is going to be in the notes. You are not going to want to miss part 2. Head over there now, and I'll meet you in the lab.